And I'm back here with Kevin Arnett, and my other very special guest today is Barry McInerney. How are you both?
Just fine.
Fantastic,
Good.
Michael. Thanks to technology.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's kind of two parallel streams in the origin of common law. One is that it originates naturally within us. It's sometimes they call it the love nature. It's the inherent liberty and sovereignty we all have as freeborn men and women. And it's just a matter of acting on it. It's also common sense. It's Edward Coke, one of the founders of English jurisprudence, said that common law is simply common sense. And it prevails. It's the most basic system of law. It's customary law. It's the things that people have done over the centuries by which they live together in peace and prosperity. So on a more basic level, though, it also has to do with the body of law that's arisen in England, especially since Magna Carta. And it was designed specifically as a counterweight against absolutist rulers like kings and popes, who claim absolute jurisdiction over everybody, basically from their own authority, not because of any consent of the governed. And those two systems have always warred against each other. But common law arose as a way to defend the people against arbitrary power. And if anything, it's especially needed these days.
Well, common law comes from the Ten Commandments: thou shalt not kill, steal, rob your neighbor, and so on. So maritime law has been around since the 12th century, and it has become entrenched, but basically in fiction. So an act of parliament, I call it an act of corporation, is basically a contract. So if you don't contract it, it is no law. But they have taken over the Bar Association, and the word bar means fence. So anything inside that fence is their jurisdiction. But I think Kevin would agree there, if we were to plant our flag, if we could get past security and plant wherever flag we're in, which country we're in, and plant it at the bar, that court then would become our jurisdiction. But maritime law overrides the lot. But trying to get a flag in, now you have to go on 5 different levels, because the judges up there in the box cannot hear, cannot see, and anything in the box, of course, is blind, the witness box. So we'd have to have 5 flags, Kevin, and if we could plant the 5 flags, perhaps we might get jurisdiction. But we have to get these guys back into the Constitution, and Australia is very lucky in that respect, because we're the only ones, even New Zealand, do not have a written constitution as we do. So that gives us a really, really large advantage over the Bar Association and its criminal element.
A simple way of doing that is you define the issue. What he calls setting the train, he says any battle is won before it's fought, depending on who establishes the terrain of battle. And if you study the history of war, you'll see that any general who chose the right ground and the other opponent has to respond to that ground, they usually have the great advantage in battle. So we never respond to the terms that they've set. Like they'll say, this is the issue. We say, no, this is the issue, right? By doing that, they have to respond. And, one of the best examples I can give of that is there was about 15 or 20 of us in Canada who campaigned over about 15 years to expose the genocide against Indigenous people. They were always saying it was a matter of like abuse that had happened, occasional harm done to Native children. We said, no, it was genocide. And by using that word, just last July, the Prime Minister of Canada is now using the word genocide. They've had to come around and admit, because we didn't give up. And that was only 15 of us against the whole nation. But it doesn't matter what your numbers are. You have to determine the language and the narrative of what the issue is. And you don't let go of that. You don't go on to their terms of thought or law. You keep acting on your own, and they have to respond. And so that's the way that we can have a great advantage over even a much larger opponent.
Well, now this is interesting, because at the meeting, you've got something to say about that.
Yes, I'd like to get past the history. I'd like to make new history. And I'd like to ask Kevin, how do we start now? I'm looking at Malcolm Turnbull, Malcolm Turncoat, I call him. I can't even say his name properly, but he has done some...
He's an ex-PM.
Yeah, yes, and he's done some terrible things. I reckon it's about time we charge this guy with these plebiscites and these postal votes to create a referendum, or instead of a referendum. So I'd like to ask Kevin, if we set up a court here with a flag, who can we get to adjudicate in replacing these these barristers and so on and so forth, which are members of the Bar Association. That's what I want to do. I want to, even if we have to take them to The Hague, it's got to be done, and I want it done ASAP. So can you give me some advice on how we can do that ASAP?
You mean in terms of who would adjudicate it?
Who would adjudicate it? Yes, we need to charge people. There's a lot of people need to be charged. They've got away with so much for so long. We've been an unlawful republic, not lawful. I use the term unlawful, of course, doesn't exist in syntax grammar. We were not lawful for 33 years as members of the Commonwealth. So that's been changed. These people need to be charged, and we've got to stop them getting away with their criminal activity as ASAP. So can you give me some advice?
Yeah.
Who can adjudicate, etc.?
Well, the general answer is that a common law court can adjudicate that. And within the court, you need somebody who knows the law fairly well to act as the presiding magistrate. Now, this isn't the same kind of role a judge performs. The magistrate is a servant of the jury. And the prosecutor presents the case, the magistrate provides legal advice. But we have a way of setting that up right in the common law training manual. We kind of lay out some 12 steps about how to go about that. But the important thing is to use it as a public forum so that you're indicting these people as you're doing the case. You want the whole world to know about this because that's our strength. We do it in a public, open forum, and we put these other courts on notice that we're going to bring this material to them, like we did in Europe when we forced Pope Benedict to resign.
Yeah.
It's the Spanish government acting on the information we're given that forced his resignation because they said he might face arrest if he came to Spain. So you have allies at many levels. You've got to reach out to them all the time, let them know what you're doing.
Okay, that's fantastic news. Yes, but a common law court, we can set it up here. It's just somebody who's appropriate to adjudicate. Now, my idea, Brian Shaw, by the way, Brian Shaw has been doing grand juries, and we can see Michael now. This is fantastic. He's got his screen back working. Yes, Brian Shaw has been doing grand juries here. So I suggested we pick a place where meetings and we video it where there's 50, 60 people. And out of that, 23 people signed a grand jury indictment. And we take that to the Supreme Court and we put the appropriate stamps on so that it's got passage into these courts and through the courts. That would stand in international law. Would that be fair enough to say?
Absolutely. And you know, you might consider other methods as well, like issuing notices of personal liability to these people. Start charging them, saying that, you know, damages caused by your action or lack of it, we're going to hold you personally liable for. That always tends to scare people in power.
Yes, well, I've just done something similar to that. I actually prepared an affidavit for somebody I'm helping in a court case. And at the end of the affidavit, I've stated that I have been personally harmed because of the actions of some people, and I'm demanding recompense and all sorts of things and the return of my property. So we can hold them responsible. We just haven't done it before because we didn't know we could. But Kevin, you're going to get a lot of people now downloading and buying your book at Amazon Books, and I'll be putting up an image here for you. But it's a great piece of work, and it's so small. It's such a thin little book, and yet it's such a powerful one. It's probably one of the most powerful books I've ever read because it really lays out how we can get back to common law and use it to get our country back on track. So I want to thank you for that. And,
okay, well, you know, you know, the old saying, I'm just standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before me. We have a long tradition of common law, you know, within the English-speaking world. We've got to educate the whole world about this because it's something that anyone, anywhere can use to defend their people. Right?
Especially in Commonwealth countries, because we have that old tradition. But any country can use it. I mean, you know, I lived in Thailand for 30 years. It would be marvelous if those people up there in Thailand could comprehend what you've written, because they're dominated by a royal family and the military, and they just keep on having revolving door coups because the people have been kept dumbed down. Thais are lovely people, but they just don't understand much about the world at all. And it just comes down to education. And I'm sure it's the same in many other countries. Kevin, once we convene the grand jury, you said we need how many people to sit on the grand jury? 23 or 25?
It varies. It's bigger than a normal court of 12. Sometime in the States, it's 23. in a lot of states. But it really depends. Like in our first trial we did in Europe, common law court there, we had 54 citizen jury members. Now, but of course, a grand jury is a different purpose normally than a court. But I would say minimum 23. Yeah.
23 is,
okay.
23 is the requirement here in Australia, because Brian Shaw has done many. But where people have falling down is submitting the papers. Now, I'm sure you're aware of syntax grammar. If it's in the wrong grammar settings, you might as well write it in the wind, because it means nothing. So it's got to be written in proper syntax grammar. Otherwise, they know about it. They'll disqualify it straight away. Like when they send papers, you look at them now, and it's after the first 2 or 3 words, it becomes nothing more than fiction. So we have to remove the fiction and put it into correct grammar and order, and the correct stamps on the stuff, on the documents, to get them lodged, because even lodged documents, it's fiction. We're dealing in fiction. We've got to remove it, but we have to play their game to get into their court systems and attack them politely, and the prosecutions, especially from within, with the correct grammar in the paperwork. Would that be fair enough?
Would you agree with that, Kevin?
I agree, absolutely. You're bang on, Barry. Wording is essential. The meaning of words and the whole tradition of how something's framed, very important issue.
That's where we're going down.
Right.
See, a lot of the grand juries that Brian has issued, and Brian Shaw is a very well-learned gentleman. He knows the Constitution very, very well, and there's quite a few other people here as well. But the paperwork is where people fall down, because they look at it, people with knowledge can say, well, there's no knowledge of claim here, so straight away it becomes fiction. So that's the important thing. We'll set the grand juries up with the flag, video it, record it. 23 people make a decision that the charges will be laid. The paperwork is lodged in the Supreme Court, correctly laid out, and the stamps, etc. They are bound by law to go ahead with it.
All right. Well, we're going to be relying on you a fair bit for that, Barry, because I saw that your last video with that chap. But to be honest with you, I had a lot of trouble following that. So I'm hoping that in the future you and I can talk and simplify it down for everybody to understand. But a lot of people also have been watching Romney Stewart, the Justinian deception on YouTube. Have you seen him, Kevin?
No.
Well, he's into this language thing and he's very good at it. Boy, oh boy, he knows just about anything you need to know about it. So you might want to make a note of that, the Justinian deception on YouTube.
Okay.
And, okay, so the next step after a grand jury, when we have issued indictments, is to form a common law court. Now, what's the procedure there?
Well, the simplest way is to issue a notice of statement of claim, and a publicly issued notice. Again, this is all in the book, these steps, the 12 steps. But if someone can make a statement of claim, you're putting whoever on notice, the defendants, that this action is going to start. You make a call for jury members. The key position to have is a citizen prosecutor, because that person issues the actual indictment. You know, I often say that if you have a prosecutor who knows the issues and the evidence, and a sheriff, peace officer, to deliver the warrants and the summonses and all that, those are the 2 figures you need. Because a sheriff under English law and in America, the local sheriff, county sheriff, has the right to convene juries and even depose judges. They've got a very powerful position. That goes back to England, early Middle Ages. You know,
so Sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah.
No, it's Sharif law, actually. It goes back to Sharif. I think the Sharif law or something in England. It's a very, very old England law. And they brought it into the Republic in Ireland and created a sheriff in Ireland, which is, of course, in a republic is totally nonsense, fiction.
Yeah, that's tradition of the shires in England.
Shire, that's it, shire law.
The shire, yeah. The shire reeves, yeah. People can do it in different ways, but the important thing is to be able to say, we are beginning this action, we're calling for jury members, we're issuing summonses and the case to the people who we're charging, and then you're basically indicting the system that way, and then everything follows from that.
Right, and that's why we have to convene the grand jury first so that we can gather the evidence. Exactly. And that's becoming a very difficult job. I've asked lots of people to submit their affidavits, and they go onto the website and they fill in the form, they forget to attach the affidavit, and I don't know why. And I've tested the upload facility on the form. It works. So either they don't understand or they're just not doing it. But either way, we can't convene anything until we have the affidavits in our hand, and then we can convene the grand jury, and from there we can start issuing indictments. Now, you mentioned there that we need a sheriff and who else?
The public prosecutor.
Public prosecutor.
Yeah.
How do we find these people? Do they have to have special qualifications?
Well, I often say to people, you need a sheriff who's big.
We've got a few of those in our group, yes.
Well, you've got to make an impression. A lot of this is theater, and you got to have somebody who looks like they're in a position of authority. But the most important thing in terms of the sheriff is somebody with a head on their shoulders. They're not going to lose their head. They act reasonably and responsibly, and they know the law. And the same for the prosecutor, but the prosecutor has to be very well steeped in the issue, know the evidence backward and forward, and have a whole strategy of how they want to pursue this. So somebody who's very on the ball, who's known the issue for many years, right?
Okay, well, that's making it very difficult for us right now in Australia.
I disagree.
This is very new.
Speak for
No,
yourself.
for most Australians. Yeah, no, for us up here, because, you know,
In Queensland, yeah, okay.
Yes, in Queensland. We're just getting started here, and even though there's a common law court up in Rockhampton, down here on the Sunshine Coast, we're just getting started and we're feeling our way. But, you know, the good thing is we've got Kevin here who can advise us and help us to get this all started. But we also need good people, and out of the 40 people who came along to the Sunday session, I don't know yet. I don't know them well enough yet to say how many would be able to step into those shoes. I don't think I'm qualified yet because my knowledge is just learning, you know, I'm just starting.
Yeah, sadly.
Well, you know, one intermediary step that's really important is after you have a group of people around who want to work on this is do a small training workshop. Take a whole Saturday. We have kind of a format for that. Do an actual workshop to answer people's questions and give them confidence that they can act on the knowledge they have, right? That's very important to actually start training people, right?
Yes. Well, we've already agreed on that. So at this stage, we're meeting once a month, but I noticed that the Rockhampton group has already started going to meeting every 2 weeks. So, you know, I think things are starting to heat up enough that once we get enough interested people, this is going to expand very quickly. Yep. And the only way we can do this is to actually do it.
Yeah, there's a small group of us here in Victoria. We're meeting every week. There's about 8, and there's quite a bit of, like, we all add in 10% knowledge. That becomes pretty important. So it all comes down, everything we do has got to be knowledge with claim, and we've got to start doing the paperwork. Now, I've been looking at David Miller's syntax grammar, and I love it, and I spend 3 or 4 hours a day, so I can look at a document and tell you that's after the first couple of sentences in it, it's fiction, and we got to practice writing it with knowledge of claim. I already sent a letter to the head of the fines place with the knowledge of claim, and I actually sent back his paperwork like a school teacher does with all the red marks on it, you know, and trying to back to them. So, you know, we have to do that. We just got to shoot it down. I believe that only fools and corporations go to court, and the paperwork, as long as where you eliminate the ability or the necessary, like someone who was summoned, well, that's not now time, it's past time, so it doesn't really apply now. So those little small details are very important. What do you reckon, Kevin?
Very much. And, you know, that brings up another aspect that's really important. These things we're establishing have to be courts of public record, which means there has to be competent recorders. We need a record of this stuff because the record of a common law court is open to public scrutiny. It can't be rewritten the way it happens in these courts today. Judges can throw out evidence. You know, it's all out there for public scrutiny and for the jury. So that's a very important aspect technically that needs to be in place.
Now that brings up an interesting question, because after the meeting the other day, somebody was objecting because I wanted to get an election of people to help run the meeting. So we wanted a president and a vice president who would actually do all determining the meetings, etc., and the topics for discussion. We need a secretary to record the meetings, and we also need a treasurer to look after the money. There's only 4 positions that I was asking people to stand for, and somebody objected, but you are going to be taking it out of the private into the public. And I had to explain to them in an email, no, that's not the purpose. We're not going to register the group as a corporation or even a not-for-profit. It's simply so that we can record the minutes of the meeting and get it organized properly. And that does not take it into the public. But as you say, once we get a common law court going, that has to be conducted as a court of public record. Again, that doesn't mean that we register it with the government. That's the worst thing we can do.
Yes.
Yeah, but you never do that.
All right, look, Kevin, we're going to have to cut this short because I know we kept you waiting, and I'm very sorry for that.
Okay.
But as usual, you've come up with some fantastic information, and we'll keep on going if you don't mind in future.
Anytime, guys. Anytime, we'll set it up, whatever you need.
Fantastic. And Barry and I will, of course, be talking about the language thing as well as many other things too. So, our podcasts now are reaching out to thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people around Australia. I've got business owners writing to me asking me, can they put my podcast into their business website, which is great news. There are a lot of people out there who are very interested in this topic. And unfortunately, in Australia, the political parties have trained most people not to even want to discuss politics, but they're starting to realize that everything we do is political. So this is all starting to expand. And as we expand, the demand for true law under common law and accountable government is growing. So, Kevin, I want to thank you for this because your knowledge and advice is invaluable. So I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Brothers, anytime you need me, I'm happy to do it.
And I'll try not to have so many technical problems next time. I figured out what the problem was, but I'll tell you about it after the show. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye for now.
Bye, Kevin. Thanks. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah. Talk to you again.
Sure. Promise. I promise, as they say.